Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Rachel Lighty. We still have a couple folks joining the call, so I'm going to give it one more minute and we can get started. Can I just get confirmation from someone that you are able to hear me? All right, thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Okay. So, let's get started. And I'm going to kill my camera just to save bandwidth. But I should be sharing my screen now. And today I'm going to be operating in this training subscription environment. This is FutureFeed end user training number 1. And after today's session, well, today I'm going to be, covering a lot of the tool. I will be reviewing the dashboard area, start, people, tools, and documents, and then I'm going to stop there. And then after today's session, whenever you feel ready to sit through the second training, go ahead and sign up for that the same way you signed up for this training session. And we will cover assess, SSP, future feed, and deliverables in that second session. Okay. So the way we do our training is this is just our recommended approach to filling out the tool and populating the tool and getting started with the tool. However, there are no areas that are locked or inaccessible until you fill out or complete a different section of FutureFeed. So you really can approach filling out FutureFeed whatever works best for you. But all of the data fields should be filled out. Because that's how you're going to, use FutureFeed to the best of its ability for compliance management. Okay, so when we talk about, well, first let me say that this session is being recorded. Okay, so about an hour and a half after I end the call, you'll get a link to the recording. And I am working on one monitor today, so I don't see any of the chat room, but occasionally I'll jump in and see if there's any questions in the chat room. Feel free to ask questions in there, or feel free to interrupt me and ask questions along the way. So our recommended approach to filling out FutureFeed and getting started with FutureFeed is to start with this start area, and that's why we've titled it Start, which is where you start filling out your company information. You start identifying your system and the system scope, the data types in the system.
Set that as a secondary screen and follow along.
Was there a question? Was that a question for me?
Oh, shit.
No worries, no worries. All right, so no worries. So here's where you start defining your, I'm sorry. If you guys don't have a question for me, could you please go on mute? All right. So the start area, again, it's where you're defining the company that owns this system. You're starting to define the system, the data types in the system, and then you have some settings related to FutureFeed here. After you fill out start, we recommend going over to the people area and start defining your compliance users, roles, and teams. Okay, so think about all of the individuals involved with implementing these requirements or maintaining the implementation of the requirements throughout the years, okay? Think about the requirements that you're working with. For example, if you're working towards CMMC level 2, 800, 171, You could go ahead and look at the requirements to get an idea of what the requirements are, and then start thinking about the people involved with implementing those requirements or overseeing those requirements. Okay. So I recommend just putting together a list of users, and you're going to want to identify the users who will need access to FutureFeed versus the users who you just want to log in FutureFeed. So that way you can identify them as being responsible for something, but they don't really have access to your FutureFeed environment. Um, so think of start putting together a list of users, and then your system administrator, your future feed administrator will have to start logging those users. Okay. And then start building out the security related roles and teams. And we recommend you start with people because then after people under tools, documents, assess in your SSP and in your system POAM, all in these sections, you're assigning responsibility. For example, in tools, you're going to assign responsibility for, the tools using this RACI model. So who's responsible for this firewall? What team, what role, what person is responsible for the firewall? Who's overall accountable for this item? Is there anybody internal or external that needs to be consulted when there's any issues or changes to this firewall? Does anybody need to be informed when things come up and are related to this firewall? Okay, so all throughout FutureFeed, we're using this RACI model. And if you want to be able to identify a certain team as being responsible for something or a certain role as being accountable, or even assigning an individual person to work on an item, okay? So if you want to be able to identify a person by name or a certain role or a team, you're going to have to build those out in this people area. So here's where you identify those users, roles, and teams. That's why we recommend starting here after you first build out a little bit of your compliance boundary. Okay. And then after you define the people and the roles and the teams involved, then you could go on. We recommend going on to tools and start identifying your technology, your online and cloud IT assets, service providers, vendors, major applications, and software. Okay, so here I would. You're going to need a list of assets to start logging into FutureFeed. Um, and then after you log the assets by hitting on the plus button, identifying that asset, titling it, you're going to create one of these entries. So let me go on this BitLocker. Then after you log the item, we recommend opening up the item like this and getting somebody, a team, or an individual assigned as responsible, and setting this accountable um, responsibility. Then going up into connect and start tagging the requirements. Okay, so here this is an item called BitLocker. It does encryption, and I would start associating this asset with the requirements that I am meeting by using BitLocker. So my encryption requirements. So you can search by keyword here. And you can change the depth of your search. So here I'm just searching at the control title level. Here's the control level. Here I'd be searching at the objective level, and there I'm searching in all of the control guidance. So you can search by keyword, but I would start identifying. So let's see. Encrypt CUI on mobile. Uh, Another good one, CUI encryption. Okay. And then you could also search by keyword if you know them. Or not keyword, the ID if you happen to know it. Okay. So that's at the very least. So after you're done logging your people, go over to tools and start logging your assets, creating a record for them. Then open up that record assign somebody responsible and accountable, then go over to the connect and start connecting it to the requirements. Okay. So just note that all these other data fields, like eventually we do recommend going back and filling out a lot of this other data that gets captured here. But at the very least, to get you started with FutureFeed is to log the assets, assign responsibility, and connect it to the requirements. And then after tools, go over to your security documents subway stop and start logging the documents, identifying responsible and accountable, and connecting them to the requirements. The exact same thing we did with tools. So just log by hitting log, and then open up that entry, identify responsible and accountable, and then connect. So here I have audit and accountability policy. What are the requirements? What requirements are being addressed or supported by this audit and accountability policy? Okay, so you could, let's see. Oh, I don't think we could search by the first. Let's go like that. So start connecting them to the requirements, okay? Then after you're done adding in your documents, we recommend then going on to the assess. And at this point in time, you should be able to perform a mini, and I guess I shouldn't say mini, but you'll be performing an internal gap assessment. Or if you happen to have gap assessment results already, you could just copy and paste them in. Or I would recommend just, kind of conducting another internal assessment so you can have a more current status and idea of where you're at as far as compliance. So here, when you get to the assess though, because when you logged your tools and because when you logged your documents, you were connecting those to the requirements, when you do your assessment or you start filling out this area, a lot of those requirements will be connected to some documents and tools. Okay, so under the requirement, under examine is where your documents will be found. So any documents that you connected to this requirement will be found here. And then any assets that you connected to this requirement are found under this test area. Okay, so you've connected some of your evidence and some of your uh, artifacts and evidence, you've connected it to this requirement as you were logging them. So when you're doing this internal assessment, you should be able to read the requirement, and then read the different objectives and get an idea, start, speaking to the right people at your company and learning more about how this requirement's implemented. But it should already be connected to some of those documents and those assets. So it should help you with, kind of figuring out, oh, yeah, okay, this is how we're meeting this requirement because we have this policy. Or maybe, there's an issue. This policy, you guys do have an access control policy, but it doesn't define something specifically that's required. And so you'll just create a task in here to get the access control policy updated. But that's what so after you do a little assessment and you start reviewing the requirements and mapping your evidence, you're going to identify where you have gaps in evidence or you have gaps in implementation. And you'll be creating POAM items. So here in the assess area, every time you mark something not met, for example, let's do objective E. Notice here, there's just a plus. When I mark something not met, now I've created one POAM item. Okay. And here it is. Your next step would to be tailor the poem. What was the issue? Define what was the issue, where was the gap, what's missing, and then start defining what's that implementation plan or what's the remediation plan. It's going to be pre-filled out with just some like templated guidance, but you should be, customizing this POAM description to fit your organization. And then down here, get it assigned responsible and accountable and set a due date. So as you're doing your assess and you're reviewing the requirements and you mark things not met, you're creating POAMs. After you've reviewed all of the requirements here, then we recommend going over to your system security plan and giving that a review. Because at this point in time, if you have identified your tools, you've identified your security documents, you've conducted an assessment, and you've created poem entries for any failures, or you've marked things met and you've connected it to the right evidence, the right proof, and you've described how that's been implemented. By that time, when you generate your system security plan or you review it, it's going to be pretty filled out. It may not be 100% accurate. You're going to still have some gaps and unknowns that you're going to have to look into. But at this point in time, your SSP, you should start seeing that it's being built out, and you could start reviewing the SSP. And where you see red, that's where I'm missing some information. So you're going to start addressing the issues. Then after you're done reviewing the SSP, next is to start working on all of the things that failed, all those non-compliant items that are found. Now, as you were logging tools, documents, and you did your assessment, you were creating POAM items. So all those POAM items will be found here in this page. And then you'll start building out different projects to get those poem items remediated and getting the people engaged, the right people engaged to start doing that work. After that, then you can just over here under deliverables is where you're running poem reports, SSP reports. It's going to take days or a couple weeks to fill out this assess page here. So, as you're doing that work, you can create a report that shows your progress in that assess field, and shows the progress of your score and how many marked complete and how many are marked failed. So that's kind of our recommended approach to using and getting started with FutureFeed and populating FutureFeed is to start with start, go to people, then tools. You're working left to right on this subway stop. And then once you make your way all the way through, as you can see here, this assess is only 43% done, 66% done over here. I've not completed every area, so I have some gaps and I have some stuff to work on, but at least I've built FutureFeed up enough that I can start assigning poems to individuals or getting people working on the right documents or identifying my, technology more. So, with that being said, that's our recommended approach, and I'm going to follow that in training. So today we're going to cover dashboards, start, people, tools, and documents, and then in the second session we'll cover assess, SSP, or FutureFeed and deliverables. This training session is, I'm sure as you notice, is open to any FutureFeed user, so you can sign up for this training session multiple times if you need to. As you're starting to do the work in FutureFeed, if you have any issues or questions, you might want to rejoin this training just to be able, ask those. Other resources we have available to you for getting your questions answered, okay, is these getting started guides. So right now, I'm in the cyber readiness deliverable section of FutureFeed. And if I click on this, it's going to tell me all about the cyber readiness presentation builder and how to use it and what do you do. But if I click over here under documents and I go to my policies section, if I click on the getting started guides here, now this is all about policies and what policies you should capture in FutureFeed and how do I log a policy in FutureFeed, or how do I use FutureFeed provided templates? There's some guidance there. So these getting started, this getting started guide here is different. It changes. It's only going to show you the information related to the page you are in. Okay. So look there for answers if you have some questions or you need some guidance. Check out the getting started guides. In the top right, click on your user icon and go down to Help Center. So this is where we post all of our knowledge-based articles, videos, how-tos. Note when you come to this website, you will be signed out, and we recommend you create an account so that way you can be logged in, and now you will have access to all of our knowledge-based articles. Some of them, we only allow logged in users to have access to, so that way, because we don't want our competitors looking at more detailed, guidance on how the tool's built and all that stuff. So, check out, search here for your answers. Other things available to you. Okay, scroll down. No matter what page you are in, FutureFeed, just scroll down to the bottom. The first registration link is to register for the second session. Okay. The second registration link is a weekly open office hour meeting. So it's a 30-minute meeting every Thursday, with myself or someone else if I'm out. But just register for this one time, and then it will be on your calendar every week. And then just join the weeks that you have questions or you need help, and you can ask anything there. It is an open forum. Okay, we do have roughly 20 to 30 people join each week, and that's just because mostly we end up talking about CMMC or NIS 171 or just the requirements in general. We often talk about, a lot of FutureFeed users join and they share advice on how to get something implemented, or they just went through an assessment, so they'll share advice on their recent assessment. So a lot of good conversations. That's every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Just register once and
Hey,
then
Ben,
that you want to
I'm
join.
planning on working from home tomorrow. So if you need anything, just let me
Ah.
know, but
All right. Brian, I just muted you, so if you're all right. So other than that, um, you can always email support@futurefeed.co to initiate a help desk ticket with us. So anything, just shoot an email to support@futurefeed.co, and they'll route it to the right person and get you the right answer. Um, or you can always sign up for this session again and sit through it as many times as you want. Okay, so let's go over this dashboard area real quick. So the first compliance dashboard, pretty self-explanatory here. I'm not going to cover much. It's a semi-interactive, um, you know, graph that you can drill down to the objective level to get details. Assessment Prep Center. What this is, this first subpage here, the reviews subpage here, is a complete listing of all of the pages in FutureFeed, all of the different sections in FutureFeed. And what you can do is you can assign review, input, or approval of the different sections of FutureFeed to individuals. Okay, so for example, I like to use this contract manager page. So if I'm gonna click on it, you can click on these, it brings you to that section of FutureFeed. So here I'm in the contract manager section of FutureFeed, where you identify your company's cage code or cage codes, and you identify the different contracts that your company holds. And more, the important piece is what clause is present in those contracts that is driving the need, to implement NIST 800-171 or the FCI requirements, or DFARS, or have FedRAMP moderate cloud service providers, right? So you want to track the different clauses that are present, which call out specific cyber requirements. Now, at a company, uh, you know, the system net, or your network administrator is not going to know may not know what your cage codes are, or the contracts. The IT department, they may not know it, so what you would do is you would assign this page here, this compliance review. This box right here, every page has this little compliance review box. Okay. So if I click on people, here's people. And so I can assign this page to someone at my company who's going to know the cage code and the contract information. Okay. Then they, to me, are the person responsible for filling out this data and maintaining this data. Okay, then they can mark it reviewed or approved. Now, notice how it captured my name there. That's because I'm logged in and I was the one to click the box. But Mina would be the one to log in and click that box. But then you can also have them approve it, or you could have someone else approve the page, that data. Okay, so this whole compliance review box, it relates back to that assessment prep review checklist. So here, if I scroll down under the contract manager page, it's been approved by me today. So it's just looking at that little review box on every page in one listing here. So you can quickly manage and see where all your pages are at as far as reviewed, assigned, and approved. Now, we recommend doing this, reviewing and approving the content that's in FutureFeed, definitely right before any internal or external assessments. Okay, because a lot of this data is being used to build your system security plan. For example, that contract manager data and the cage code data, that information gets displayed in your system security plan. Your system security plan has to be associated with a cage code or cage codes. And so if that's inaccurate, when I go over under deliverables and I generate my SSP report, that data is going to be inaccurate because it's inaccurate in FutureFeed. So that's why we recommend doing a review and approval of the different sections of FutureFeed, and you can track and log that activity here prior to any internal or external assessments. So that way, when you generate your SSP or your system POAM, you know it's going to be accurate because the data in FutureFeed's accurate. Okay. This critical dates subpage here is just another project management tool where you can use to plan out your CMMC certification effort. The timeline from when you prep for the assessment to when you're going to have the assessment. After your assessment, if you had any findings that were POAMable, you have 180 days to remediate and get those reassessed, right? So you'd want to track that date. And then once you get your certification, it's good for 3 years. So when's the next time you need to have that assessment? When do you start prepping for that next assessment? So just a project management tool here. Sorry, something popped up. Okay. Team responsibilities. So this is where you go. Anybody who has an account or assigned responsibility in FutureFeed, using that RACI model, tasks or POAMs, you're going to see all those people listed here. So that way you can, see what that person has assigned to them just by clicking on their name. This is everything that's assigned to Jeff. For the requirements, he's assigned as informed under 318, but he's responsible for these controls here. If I want to see my own responsibilities, then just click on individual responsibilities, and now it's showing me what I have assigned to me. This is where, if you're a FutureFeed user, every time you log into FutureFeed, I would recommend setting this individual responsibility as your default view. You can just change that default view here. For example, if I click on dashboards, it's going to bring me to this compliance dashboard every time. If I watch, I'll click on assess, click on dashboard here. But I can change my default view. So every time I click on dashboards, it's just bringing me to my individual responsibilities. And that default view is only, changed for you. And it doesn't change for everybody in your environment. So anyway, but I would make it a point every time you log in or once a week, come in here and look at your individual responsibilities. This is where you're going to see everything that's assigned to you in your compliance efforts. All right, now up here in the top right corner under user settings, you can go under my preferences and you can set email notifications. So when you get new assignments or due or overdue tasks, you'll get an email to Outlook or whatever your email is. And then so that will also alert you, hey, you have something going on in FutureFeed, log into FutureFeed. Then you'd log into FutureFeed and check out your responsibilities. All right, so that's pretty much the dashboard area. Any questions on dashboards? All right, so under start, I'm gonna skip through some of these sections. It's pretty self-explanatory. Let me know if you have any questions along the way. Company information, corporate data, pretty self-explanatory. Company logo, information about the company, name, address. Down here, you have an area to define your company's risk appetite. Okay, we are working on adding more risk metrics and risk uh, tracking and tracking capability and reporting capability into FutureFeed. Here in the future, you'll see more updates to that. But as of right now, this is pretty much the only area that we have that specifically, mentions risk. And what you're doing here is you're identifying your company's approach to how you handle risk. You risk accepting, adverse, tolerant. What's that? What's your approach? Then this is how you use the info, or I'm sorry, I'm like a million miles an hour right now. So in your system POAM over here, I'm under your FutureFeed system POAM. Eventually, you're going to have a list of non-compliance and vulnerabilities and system flaws. So it's typical, then you'll have to start prioritizing remediation efforts, right? You only have so many support people. Things can't be fixed all at once. So you're going to want them to start fixing the things that have greater impact. And you start prioritizing your POAM items based on impact, effort, and cost, as well as your company's approach to handling risk. So that's where you're going to factor this information in, is when you start working in your system POAM. Company description here, some more just kind of pretty self-explanatory here. You have a place to define IT cybersecurity budget and cybersecurity insurance, coverage dates, and what it covers. Locations, this is a pretty important area of FutureFeed. So under locations, you're starting to define your physical locations that are in scope of the requirements. So to log a location, just hit new location, fill out at the very least the red information that needs to be captured. And then what you'll do is you'll hit save and then you'll click on that location. So then you'll have this, you'll be able to capture all this information for this location. Responsibility, accountability, remember to connect it to the requirements. So at a location, at a physical location, what are the requirements you have to implement at your physical location? You can see here I've tagged all of the 310 requirements because these are all your physical security requirements in 800-171. Okay, so these other fields here, I'm going to go over these a little bit later. When I get to tools and documents, we'll go over these sections later. So your locations, your tools, and your documents are going to have this same kind of look. They're going to have this folder where it's an entry, a record item, and then you open up a folder. There'll be an overview tab, connect tab, compliance, task, and evidence. You're going to see this is a A location record, if I go over here and I select a tool, the same layout, okay? If I go over to documents, same layout. So we'll cover all these fields when I get to tools and documents. But what you should know for locations is this is where you're defining the physical locations where the data that you're trying to protect is being stored, processed, or transmitted. So for your FCI, then what location is storing, processing, or transmitting FCI data? CUI, okay. And to identify that under the compliance tab, you can identify this location as being, storing, processing, or transmitting CUI data with this CUI icon, or you can identify if there is FCI or at this location as well. Okay. Maintenance and ownership, here you're defining just at a high level who, the hardware and software that is in scope and who maintains and owns that. And if you want to see how I wrote it up here, I did provide an example in the getting started guides. If you go to compliance implications, there's a example of how I would have written that up. Under scope, you're defining your system, giving it a name, unique identifier. A lot of this information here, so whenever you see an asterisk, this is all being used to populate your system security plan, okay? And then if you have any questions, check out these getting started guides or hover over the green eye. Wherever we have a lot of questions related to something, we've put this little green info dot where you can click on it to learn more, okay? So describe the system, purpose of the system. A lot of this information is being used to build out that top section of your SSP. We already went over the contracts area, but this is where you're identifying cage codes, and contracts. Data inventory. So this is where you're defining the type of data in this environment. So if it's an FCI environment, I need to identify my FCI assets. And that's just by clicking, toggling things on and off. So down here under where it lists these tools and services, yours is going to be blank. You do have to log tools. So over under tools here, you're going to have to log these tools. Then after you log these tools, go back to your FCI environment and you can toggle on and off which assets are your FCI assets. CUI inventory is a little bit differently, a little bit different. It lays out all of the NIST CUI categories. These all hyperlink to the NIST CUI registry. So you can click on that. And here is you're essentially just identifying the CUI categories that are being stored, processed, or transmitted in this environment. And most commonly with DoD contractors, where it's in this defense subcategory here, typically CTI, controlled information. So if your environment has controlled information, all you're going to do is just check that box that identifies that information as being stored, processed, or transmitted. Now, where you're seeing all these wrenches show up, let me demonstrate this for you. Let's do bank secrecy. Let's say you have CUI data, bank secrecy CUI data in your environment. First thing I would do is click on it because that's going to tell me if it's specified or basic, and it all comes down to which dissemination authority you're operating under. That's how you're going to identify if that data, if your bank secrecy CUI data is either specified or basic. And then depending on that is how you mark it. So basic, you just do the CUI marking. But if you have specified data, you have to mark it a certain way as shown here. Okay. So that's why we included the hyperlinks is one, so you can identify if that, is specified or basic, which will help you figure out your marking requirements. But let's say we were doing specified bank secrecy. So I just checked that box. That tells me somewhere in this environment, bank secrecy, CUI specified data is being stored, processed, or transmitted. Now I can take it a step further and call out specific assets involved, my CUI assets. And that's when this tool icon shows up. So to do that though, you have to do that under the tool. So you have to associate that type of data to that specific tool. So you have to go into the tool. Let's say Jira. Jira for me in this fake environment is a CUI asset. And let's say in my Jira, I am storing, processing, and transmitting that bank secrecy CUI specified data. So I click it here. And now when I've done that, I can go back and I should see Jira Cloud as in my data inventory. So I'll go back to my CUI data inventory and scroll down to bank secrecy. And now instead of the checkbox, you see this wrench icon. And now I'm not only saying that in this environment, I'm storing, processing, transmitting CUI bank secrecy data, but specifically this asset, maybe it's all housed in there or something. Eventually you'd have, oops, sorry, clicking everywhere. Eventually you'd have, if you want to get that granular with your data flow and your, you'd have a whole listing of assets involved with storing, processing, or transmitting that data. So it's your choice if you just want to use, just identify or, be very granular and call out specific assets. The only reason I'd recommend doing it this way is if you still need to identify your asset scope and identify where, the assets that are in your environment, the assets that need to meet these requirements. If you still have to define your environment, you're going to have to go through the whole data flow mapping process and scoping process. And so you could use this page to help document that analysis as you go. Sensitive data, this is, if you want to use it, it's purely to identify other data other than FCI and CUI, but other data that your company needs to, protect. So proprietary business data, confidential, employee PIs. You can create custom categories if you scroll way down to the bottom. So FutureFeed is a CMMC tool, so we're concerned about FCI and CUI, but if there's other data in this environment that you want to identify and track, then you can use that sensitive data inventory page here. And then lastly, the settings here. You can integrate FutureFeed with your ticketing system. You could see here support at futurefeed.co. When this is enabled, then where you see this capability, you're going to see it a couple places, but I'll just show you the icon, what it looks like. So it's wherever you see this email icon, this little, not email icon, this little mail icon here. For example, I could send a email to my ticketing system providing a status update on this poem item here, implementing multi-factor authentication. So here I could provide my status update notes and then hit send. So if you are using a ticketing system to overall track your project, then that's how you integrate FutureFeed with your ticketing system here. If it's disabled, then you're still going to see the email, or I'm sorry, the mail icon, but you just can't click on it. Poem default due date here. All poems that you create in FutureFeed, they're going to have a default due date. You can change that due date, but here's how you control what that default is. So if I made a poem today, the due date is going to be roughly three quarters out. Organizational scale. So just like your risk tolerance, this is also used when you're managing poem items or you're creating poem items. So as I showed you, when you create a poem item, you can identify impact, effort, cost. And so as you prioritize all your issues, you will prioritize the items that have greater impact. Maybe, this will help you prioritize your workload. And so what you're doing here is you're defining that scale. Because what you want to do, let's say you have 5 different people working in FutureFeed, and all 5 different people are creating poem items. Well, for every poem item, you capture impact, effort, and cost. So if I have 5 different people making poem items, I need everyone to be on the same page as far as what impact, effort, and cost means, so that they're all scaled appropriately. So first, you define what impact, effort, and cost means for your company, and then communicate that scale to everybody and have them follow it. So for a smaller company, maybe a low cost item is, a small company, maybe $500. But for a large company, a low cost item may be $5,000. Okay. So you define the scale, and then everyone uses the scale when creating poem entries. Once you define it here, where you can, up here in the top right, there's this little ruler organizational scale here. If you want to refer to that, just click on it and it will tell you what you've defined. All right, so that's the start area. After you fill out that company information and you start filling out some of the system information, log or go on to people and start logging your users, defining the security related roles, and defining teams that are going to be involved. Now, you do have to be a system administrator to add new user. So but it's often that your system administrator doesn't really know everyone that needs to be involved. Okay. So you may need to just create a list and hand it over to your system security or your FutureFeed system administrator and have them start logging those people. Just hit add new user, define, you know, their level of engagement. And here they have no access. What this means is you just want to define that person so that way you can clearly identify them as responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed in the RACI model, but they won't have access to the FutureFeed environment. But if so that's what no access is. Otherwise, your options are standard access, where they do have access to your FutureFeed and can do most of everything, or admin, which is, only a couple people should have admin role, and this is the people who manage user access to your environment and some subscription settings. And then assessor, whenever you have a internal or external assessor, someone who's performing an assessment for you, you can give them access to your FutureFeed environment with an assessor role, and they will only have view only access to your system security plan and your evidence and artifacts that you have associated with the requirements. Okay. So yeah, generate a list of everyone who needs access or anyone you just need to log in FutureFeed, identify their level of access, and then someone with FutureFeed admin rights will need to create those accounts. Okay. After you log your users, go over here and start defining the security related roles that are involved. We have some default roles, but you don't have to use them. You could just mark them not applicable if you don't want to. After roles, then start defining the teams that are involved. Under teams here, we have this populate function. So what we've done is pre-built some teams. These are all typical roles or teams that you see at companies or being involved with CMMC. Okay, so for example, if you have someone doing training, even if you don't call them the training team, you can still build this training team. Now it's going to be automatically associated with these 4 requirements here that call out training requirement. And so you could create that team and then go down, find the team. I created a training team. And even if it's a one person, a team of one, uh, manage the members of that team and then assign your person to the team. And now Bart, by being a member of this team, Bart is going to be automatically assigned as responsible for those 4 requirements that we identified, okay, under the assess area. So if I go to the AT controls, if my change took under interview, under my responsible, there's Bart because he's part of the training team. Okay, now Bart is responsible for conducting training per 321 and whatever we say here. Okay, so that's what that under people teams populate is you can build out some teams here that are automatically connected to the requirements. And a good one you can use, I would recommend using, is the system network administrator. So whether you have an in-house system administrator or you're hiring an external service provider to do your system and network administrating, whoever is doing it is going to need to have, they're going to be probably responsible or, have some level of responsibility with regards to these 79 requirements listed here, because these are all very technical requirements. And we've been doing this a long time. And so it's very common that a system or network administrator person is involved with these 79 requirements. And so if you're just getting started with CMMC and NIST 171 and you got to divvy up those requirements, then I would recommend using these pre-built teams and then creating the team and then, assigning the user to the team. All right. After people, then, and this is where I'll stop today, is under tools and documents. I talk about them together because it's, the pages are laid out the same way. So under tools and documents, like I said, you're going to log your technology and you're going to log your security documents. Doesn't matter which one you're under, you're going to hit the plus button to log a new item. And then under tools, you're defining mission, which means, what is the purpose of that tool? Let's call it a firewall. Let's say I'm going to log off my firewall. And then the firewall I am using is Sentinel firewall. And it's actually hosted in the cloud. Okay. So you're just going to log your assets that way, or go over under documents and hit log. What is it? Am I logging a policy procedure? And hit log. That's how you log an item. And now you've just created a whole folder system for that item. Okay. So under tools and documents, you're going to start logging all your technology and logging all the security documents. And note in both of these, there's 2 sections. You have an active section. So anything I log here, I'm essentially saying it's in production. We're currently using it. It's being enforced, but we also have this pending section. So anything you log down here, you're going to be putting on your system POAM. And so if your company is maybe planning to acquire some MFA tool, you would log that here. Or if you're planning to implement and acquire like a SIEM or SOC type solution to help you meet some of those audit and accountability and monitoring requirements, then you would plan for that acquisition here. You would log whatever it is you're acquiring, and it's going to be logged on your system POAM so you can track that acquisition and deployment. Same thing with documents. You're going to have, active documents. Things are, these are approved, they're enforced, they're being followed right now. And then you have pending. These are things that you're working on developing. They're still in draft. They're still being worked on. Okay. So when you log something here, it's going to be put on your system POAM. But if you forget and you log something in the wrong place, no worries. You can just open it up. It's associated with this, with these two fields here. So right now my audit and accountability policy is active. If I, maybe it shouldn't be, it's still in draft. It's not been approved yet. So I'm going to put it on my system POAM and set a due date for it. Okay. So, that's the field that controls that, and you can change it. But yeah, start logging the items and then open up the items, and in the overview section, like I said, at the very least, assign responsibility and accountability, but definitely start working on, filling out this other data. And then in the connect field, get it connected to the requirements. Okay, so let me talk to you quickly about tasks. Well, let's first talk about just documents in general. In FutureFeed, you have kind of three options with documents. So I'll open up a document item. You have this live document editor where you can build out documents, maintain them, make edits to them, get them reviewed and approved all here, and it also creates a version history. Or you can attach for, if your company already has a bunch of policies that are approved and housed somewhere else, we recommend attaching then or uploading that approved version. Or you can even link to it. So over here under notes, you can click on the link icon and you could drop a link. Maybe that document is stored on SharePoint and you want to leave it on SharePoint, so you'll just add a SharePoint link. We don't really recommend using the links because whenever you want to generate a body of evidence in FutureFeed's not going to be able to access that link and pull down a copy of whatever it is there. So we do recommend at the very least attaching your current document. So when you generate a bulk, zip file of all your evidence, it's included. And then if you want to use FutureFeed's features to its fullest extent, we do have this document management system capability in here. And so hit plus and you can start typing out your document here, or maybe you already have it in a Word, so you just copy and paste it in here. But this is also where you get access to our templates. And so let's say you didn't have an audit and accountability policy, but you knew you wanted to make one. Just click on the live document plus sign, go to templates, and then find whatever policy template you want to start with. Let's see, do I have one for audit and accountability? I guess we don't have one for audit and accountability here, but let's just use this generic policy template. Okay, and I'm going to use this template, hit proceed. So that's how you find and use the templates. And now you'll see in my live document editor, it has that template. So now I'm going to start filling out that template. Okay. Connect. This is where you connect to the requirements, like I said. The leader follower thing, what is happening here is I think that's a discussion for another day. We have a very good article we have a couple good articles on leader follower and how this all works. Just check out the knowledge-based articles that we have on our help center. Type in leader follower here and you'll learn about that capability. I just kind of ran out of time today to cover that. Yeah, so task, I gotta mention this and then I'm gonna close out the conversation and open up the floor quickly for questions. But under tasks, what you're gonna do is you're gonna create tasks to get things compliant. And then you're going to start creating tasks that support what you have to do throughout the years. So for example, if this audit and accountability policy, we just created the template. So now I'm going to create a task and I'm going to have the right person start tailoring this policy template to fit the company and the environment. And I'm going to assign it to the right person and give them a due date and then hit close. If I can hit close, but I got to zoom out because got too many bars in the way. All right, now hit submit. So now I've created a task. Jill is going to get notification and have it show up on her responsibility list that she needs to finish filling out this audit and accountability policy. So you're going to create tasks for, to get things done and track that required activity and that task. But then also, once you get things compliant, you're going to create tasks that support what needs to happen throughout the year. For example, in this audit and accountability policy, let's say the policy says that every quarter I have to review my audit events listing. So I'm going to create a task for quarterly audit and accountability events listing review. And I have to do this because one of the requirements says I have to do a event listing review, right? So now I'm going to assign it to the right team or person. Let's give this to the network administrator, and I'm going to make this one repeat every quarter. And once the event triggers, they have 5 day, let's say 3 days to complete the activity. And now I'm going to hit save. So now the members of that team or the person I assigned it to will get every quarter they're going to get an alert. Hey, it's time to do the quarterly uh, event listing review. And so think of everything that you need to do throughout the years, like the weekly vulnerability scans or monthly change control board meetings, annual risk assessments, quarterly access control reviews. So anything that you define a frequency for in your compliance efforts, think about trying to make it a task. So that way you can, that task is going to be triggered and someone is going to be alerted to doing that work. And then when they close that task out, they're forced to log evidence that they've completed that task. Which is essential for capturing in FutureFeed. So I apologize, I've gone over by a few minutes. Does anybody have any questions at this point in time?
I had a question.
Mhm.
So I just had a question. If I already have my company's SSP created, I would just go ahead and upload that document into FutureFeed. Is that correct?
Well, no, FutureFeed is going to generate a system security plan for you. So FutureFeed's SSP, um, over here, like here's the browser view of your SSP, and then under deliverables, you can run an SSP report.
Okay.
But FutureFeed builds your SSP based on the data you put in the assess area where you identify the status of your requirements and identify the evidence and identify how they're implemented. And then it's also gonna pull from these other fields here, and as well as this company, this start area pulls from a lot of this. So you can't just go into documents and, create an SSP entry like you did for this policy and then upload that SSP report. You can, but it's always going to be here. It's not, you have to fill out a lot of this data in order, if you want to use FutureFeed's SSP generation capability. If you guys already have an SSP method, that you want to keep using, then you would add a document this way.
Okay, so if I have like the access control procedures already created and the audit and accountability policy already created, in those cases, in those active documents, I could just go in and attach the document, or is FutureFeed's purpose for me to fill out every single one and FutureFeed itself generates each of these documents?
Oh, no. So it's up to you. FutureFeed will not generate the documents, but it's
Okay.
up to you if you want to, like I said, you can attach the document, or you could use convert it to this docx and start using, start approving it and maintaining it here. Because if it's here, then every year when you have to do an annual review or edit or any modification, you can just edit
Mhm.
this. This would be like your master record. But
Okay.
you don't have to use it. You would just attach everyone to each entry. But FutureFeed's purpose is when you go into an assessment,
Mhm.
um, after you've completed the assess area and associate all your evidence, now your assessment is going to happen a lot more quickly because all your evidence is very clearly laid out in FutureFeed and associated with the requirements.
Okay. Okay. Got you.
All right. Well, I do have to drop. Feel free to join this session or reach out to support at futurefeed.co. I'll see you all in the next training session. Bye.